Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Steve Lee. I'm an alcoholic. Man, it's a treat for me to be here tonight. I'm so grateful to have been invited and included. So thank you guys for having me. I was actually here 5 years ago at this meeting, so I'm really grateful to be back and that you guys have gotten it started back up. And I commend those that contributed to making that happen. I thank Patrick for inviting me. I want to thank, I promised Jackie I would mention her out loud from the podium as perhaps the best host I have ever had. But her job is not complete. But anyway, no, it's been terrific, and Will, thank you for, we'll talk for 10 minutes and said more than I'll say in an hour, but I'm taking the hour. I've really only got about a 10-minute talk, but it takes me an hour to give it, and so I promise not to run late. It's, if I might ask, and not to embarrass anyone, but how many people are here that are maybe a year or less sober? And that is unbelievable. That is fantastic. Thank that, yeah. Man, I'm so glad, and I'm excited for you. I hope that your experience to date, whether it's been a few days or a few weeks or a few months, has been a good one here in Alcoholics Anonymous. But if it hasn't felt good yet, don't leave yet, because trust me, it can change. It was somewhere in my first year sober, and my sobriety date's June 30th, 1989. But somewhere in that first year, when I was in AA and didn't want to be, I changed from a guy that can't drink anymore to a guy that doesn't drink anymore. And I changed from a guy that had to go to AA to a guy that gets to go to AA. And that's not through virtue or intelligence. Thank God for me and probably some of you that virtue and intelligence are not necessary ingredients for sobriety. But this just sort of happened when I wasn't paying attention. Because in those early days, like some of you perhaps, when I reached a point that I knew I needed to not drink, right? I made a decision, and I'll talk about that some more, that I need to not drink, so I'm going to try to not drink, and AA is how I'm going to try to not drink. But I thought we were going to spend a lot of time not drinking in AA. I thought not drinking was an actual activity in AA, that we will get together and not drink. Yeah. Man, would you look at him not drinking over there? And look at the technique on Patrick, man. It's unbelievable. And he looked like he was reaching for it, but no. And my buddies would call up and go, hey, Steve, man, we're going to go to the Colorado State game tonight. You want to go? And I said, well, typically I'd love to go, but I'm busy tonight. I'll be home not drinking. Somebody said, don't drink even if your ass falls off, so I'll be home not drinking, guarding my ass. And and I thought when I made that decision to not drink, to try to not drink anything at all, I thought my life was about to get really small. I was committed to it, but it felt like it was going to be self-sacrifice. It felt like it was going to be all about where I can't go, what I can't do, who I can't hang out with. I mean, people were even saying stuff like getting new playgrounds and playmates. I mean, which I've never liked that phrase anyway, to tell you the truth. Some people don't have the luxury of new playgrounds. Some people don't have the luxury of where they go back home to. What the people around me said is you can stay sober under any external conditions. Your physical sobriety is not conditional, but it might require some real commitment on your part. It might require some periods of discomfort. But they taught me early on that in AA, we played the spiritual long game, right? Yet I've spent my whole life responding to how I feel in the moment. And my sponsor, Don M., who just passed away about 7 weeks ago, Don always said that he was sober several years before he realized every feeling didn't require an action. That Alcoholics Anonymous offers me a chance to live by a set of principles rather than my thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And it's through acting on those principles that those thoughts, feelings, and beliefs begin to change. We call it a psychic change. We call it a spiritual experience. So I will, You can already tell I don't do anything my story is kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie. There's just no time and space continuum. And I'll tell a series of seemingly unrelated stories and hope they make sense at the end of the hour. And if not, no big deal. I'm going home in the morning. You know, I told you my sobriety date's June 30th of 1989, and for me that means that the last time I've had a drink or a drug was June the 29th of 1989. And I was about 6 months sober. I went to my sponsor, Frank, and I said, I'm still confused about the sobriety date. Is it the last day I took a drink or the first day I didn't? And he said, Steve, I'm just impressed with the quality of questions that are keeping you up at night. He said, I don't care. Pick one. Because I'm much less concerned with when you had your last drink than you not taking the next one. And that's where the focus has been for me since then. But on June the 29th, I did not intend to go from that night till this between drinks, I promise you. But I was scheduled into a treatment facility on July the 1st of 1989. And I say scheduled because that's the accurate terminology. I had not had some epiphany and decided I needed or wanted to stop drinking. I certainly wasn't looking for a kit of 12 spiritual tools. I wasn't looking for a spiritual experience. And I sure wasn't looking to hang out with you guys. But what I was going to do is I had been convicted of my 6th DUI a year before. And as part of a plea bargain agreement, they gave me some jail time, and they cut some of that jail time off if I would go to what they described as residential drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And I had never heard all those words strung together at one time, but it sounded marginally better than jail. So magnanimously, I said I would do that. And now on June the 29th, my wife and I went out with 3 other couples. It wasn't a particularly wild evening. In fact, I have to share with you now the most embarrassing thing I ever share from the podium of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's my last drink. The last drink I had was an amaretto on the rocks. Yeah, it's humiliating. That's no way for an alcoholic to go down. There's no AA street cred in amaretto. So you now know I didn't know it was going to be my last drink. I would have had something else. And certainly if I thought I'd be telling that story for the next 34 years, I would have come up with something. It would have been a much more colorful story. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I used to have a more exciting story. It wasn't true, but it was exciting. And but here's what I discovered, and maybe you will too. It wasn't very useful. See, what you taught me here in Alcoholics Anonymous and what our book tells me in working with others is that we tell the new man exactly what happened to us. So for me to exaggerate something or embellish something that didn't happen or to shy away from something it did is an equal disjustice to AA and to you, but the person who suffers in that is me, not AA and not you. And so what you'll hear tonight is my version of the truth. I will be honest with you tonight, but I don't have the same commitment to accuracy. Sometimes I'm honestly mistaken even about what happened to me. I know that how I see things isn't always the way how other people see them. My wife was with me a few years ago, and I'll talk about Connie some more later, but she was with me. I spoke at an AA conference. A lot of people think it was maybe the best talk ever given in Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, they didn't say it, but I could read their faces. And we go back up to the room later that evening, and she said, Steve, you know that last 10 or 15 minutes of your talk? And I prepared myself for a compliment. And I said, well, yes, I do, baby. And she said, I would love to meet that guy. She said, I wish you would bring him home sometime. And so I know how I see me is not always how other people see me, literally and metaphorically. I know how I see you is never the whole picture. You know when our book says that no one can fully define or comprehend that power, which is God? I would likewise say that none of us can fully define or comprehend that person that is right in front of us. None of us knows everything. None of us has the whole story. We are all more complicated than that. We're more layered than that. So what we have with each other and with a higher power is not a full understanding of God and not a full understanding of you. I believe what I have is my relationship to you, my touch point to you. You know, there was a story about the blind men and the elephant, right? And it says, there were 3 men from Hindustan to learning much inclined. They went to see an elephant, but all of them were blind. One of them grabbed the elephant by its tail. And one of them grabbed the elephant around its big leg, and the other one grabbed it by its trunk. And they went back to their village, and the villagers had also never seen or been around an elephant and said, tell us about the elephant. Tell us about the elephant. And the one who grabbed it by the tail said, it's rope-like. And the one who grabbed it around its big leg said, it's like the trunk of a tree. And the one who grabbed it by its trunk said, it's like a snake. And they argued endlessly about what an elephant was, never understanding that the elephant was big enough to incorporate all those characteristics, that they weren't describing the elephant, they were describing their touch point to the elephant. Well, I will tell you that that's how my relationship with this higher power works today, that I'm not confused, that I can tell you about God. What I can tell you is how my relationship with God acts in my life. And our book says that one of the things I do is telling my story is each of us in our own language and from our own point of view talks about how he established a relationship with God. At my best, I will talk about the establishment of that relationship through the process of the 12 steps in Alcoholics Anonymous rather than try to tell you or anybody who God is and what God is. We each get to have that journey ourselves. June the 30th of 1989, my wife and I took our then 5-year-old daughter to Chuck E. Cheese before Daddy was going to go away on July the 1st on a 28-day business trip. And so I know that I've already painted a pretty bleak and dark picture, and I'm not a very tough guy. That's going to be more and more clear as this goes on. But I beg of you, if you are not sober yet, do not spend your first day sober at Chuck E. Cheese. It was a hellish day at Chuck E. Cheese. You know, it is loud in there. And they are short and coming at you from every direction. And just as I was gathering my emotional balance, I saw a 6-foot mouse. And I said to Connie, baby, do you see the mouse? Then Saturday morning, July the 1st, 1989, my friend Ricky came by to pick me up to drive me off to a treatment facility called the Harbors of Brentwood in Brentwood, Tennessee, that was just about 5 miles from where I was living at the time. My wife Connie walked out with us to the car, and her last words to me before we drove off to treatment were, no matter what, baby, don't stop drinking. I know a lot of you didn't get that kind of support from your spouse or your friends or your family, but that Connie, she was rock solid. And but I will tell you, Connie and I had been married 7 years at the time. We had met just over 7 years before that. We had met, she had moved back to Nashville from Lake Tahoe, where she had been a baccarat dealer, and she had gotten married, and she had just gotten divorced. She came back to Nashville with a divorce pickup truck, a divorce pocket full of money, and a divorce 8-ball of cocaine, and I fell for that package. And I said, I think we can make this work, and we started running and gunning together a little bit, and before long, we went on a trip to Mexico and drank something out of a coconut, and we ended up on a boat that they swear went out to international waters. And an Austrian merchant marine read in Spanish what he swears was a wedding ceremony. We don't speak Spanish, so we're not sure what we agreed to out on that boat. And we have been arguing about that for close to 41 years now. But that day, and I sometimes forget to mention, and Connie thinks it's important, that her sobriety date is 10 days after mine. And we had not had another conversation from when I headed off to treatment. I was in a communication blackout for 2 weeks at the time at that particular program. And she went out to dinner and to a comedy club, actually, with 2 other friends of hers. They had a round of drinks. They had a second round. When the second round of drinks was being served and the waiter was putting Connie's drink down, she stopped him and said, "I've had enough." And if she were here, she would tell you that she did not have that thought one moment before. She did not have that thought before she ordered the first drink. She didn't have that thought when she ordered the second drink. And we used to say we don't know how that happened. And today we think we do. That she got a moment of grace. And she went 4 years without drinking and not coming to AA, and she's got that story to tell. But she does say she would have gotten to AA a lot sooner if I hadn't been so helpful to her. So lighten up on the people around you if you're coming in intoxicated with that new sobriety and riding the wave of that exuberance of love in AA, which I did right away. But I go to that treatment center, right? My buddy Ricky, we're driving over there. He says, "Steve, what do you think this thing's going to be like, man?" And look, I didn't want to be going. I thought it was unfair that I had to go. I was angry. I was afraid. I was anxious. I had a host of feelings I'm not sure I could even label or articulate. And I said, "I don't know, man." I said, "Well, I'll tell you one thing. I'm not getting in some little circle and going, 'I'm Steve, I'm an alcoholic,' and whining about the most intimate details of my life, you know." And about 3 weeks later, I was just telling people more than they wanted to know about me. And I burst open in that place, and I don't know why. I couldn't tell you a thing that happened there in terms of information. I don't remember as long. I will tell you when I walked in, because I wasn't prepared to be alcoholic right on the front end. I'm going to do my time. When I walked in, they immediately gave me what felt like a test. Many of us know the proper designation for that is assessment. I had never had one before. We've all seen questionnaires in magazines or online. AA even have its own pamphlet, you know, with the questions to kind of maybe reveal if there's alcoholism and examine my relationship with alcohol. And they did the psychosocial workup and they did a lot of the clinical things, but there was a 30-question segment of this assessment that had these 30 questions that all began with the phrase, "Have you ever?" And they said ever, by the way, means even once and even with a really good reason. Have you ever drank in the morning? Have you ever drank alone? Have you ever had a DUI? Have you ever had a blackout? Have you ever had trouble at home because of drinking? Have you ever had trouble at work because of drinking? 30, have you ever questions that you know just have check yes or check no to what are clearly essay questions. These are questions that beg for an explanation. And you know we laugh here tonight, right? And our book says cheerfulness and laughter make for usefulness. But we laugh here tonight because we're kind of on this side of that fence, right? But that morning, man, there was nothing funny that morning. And I could not make myself check the box because you're going to draw conclusions about me. And how can you, first of all, these questions are nobody can pass this. And how can you do it without me giving you some context, without me giving you the backstory, without me explaining it? And one of the problems is I think I know what they're asking, right? When they ask me, have you ever drank in the morning? I said, be specific about what you mean by morning. I think it's legitimate, right? Because I'm thinking, hey, that they're thinking I am that guy that had a half pint on the nightstand to wake up at 4 a.m. with the shakes and the sweats and has to take a pull off of it just to settle down and maybe limp into the day. And certainly I've done that a few times, but not so often I'm checking it on this test. But I asked, what if I'm out at a very nice establishment at 2 a.m. at last call somewhere? Is that morning drinking? Because if you don't tell me the difference, you'll think that I am half pint on the nightstand alcohol rather than cool out at the club alcohol. Have you ever drank alone? Yes, but they left. Did you ever look around and just, whoa, it was a party just a minute ago. Those were the cocaine days, right? But, whoa. And I got to tell you, I don't go off into the weeds, but you'll hear, like, I will use the word cocaine. I won't use outside issues, okay? I'm almost embarrassed when you do it. But here's the point I want to make. Man, I am an alcoholic. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool alcoholic. I got that very special relationship with alcohol that an alcoholic has. That's what I'm talking about. So it was a committed relationship, but it was not a monogamous relationship. Yeah. Me and alcohol invited other partners to the marital bed. And but have you ever drank alone, right? So again, I think I know what they're asking me. And that's part of my problem sometimes continuing today, that I think I know what you're asking. And I take some piece of information and make up a backstory behind it and make life-changing decisions based on bad information. Because hey, I thought that they were talking about a guy that's got to go home and close and lock the door, pull the shades, dim the lights, unplug the phone, used to be, now put it on silent or turn it off, and hide in isolation, hiding from the world. And you can bet I did that a number of times, but I'm not going to cop to it on this. But there's another kind of alone drinking that I did. I'm a guy that had to drink to go drinking, right? I see some heads nodding. Let me just, informal poll I've been taking around the country. Is drinking to go drinking really drinking? Or is it like stretching before exercise? It's really more of a preparatory thing, isn't it? Well, I have been taking the poll, but apparently UAAs are pretty committed to that total abstinence thing. I'm a guy that had to drink to go drinking because our book talks about it, right? It says that alcohol, one of the functions it serves for a guy like me is it's a social lubricant. And I get that, right? A few drinks and it's like I'm oiling myself up and I can move easily amongst you. I can be in your company. I'm not ill at ease. I'm not suffering from that hyper self-consciousness that's at the root of my trouble. I don't know any of that back then. I don't know why I'm drinking. Sometimes when we talk from behind a microphone, it sounds like a guy like me knew what was going on while it was happening. I did not. Life was happening to me. Life was coming, being fired at point blank range. And I feel like, Neo in the Matrix, just dodging, slow motion dodging the bullets that are coming, right? I'm just trying to get through the day. It says in the 12 and 12 that we're like actors in a play who've forgotten our lines. That's how I felt. I'm going through the day, and I think you know your script. I think I'm supposed to know it. I'm improvising constantly. I'm constantly having to try to read the room, read the audience, know who I'm with, figure out how to navigate this terrain when I'm sober. And it's exhausting. And it's lonely on me. I know what it's like to go someplace sober before I got to AA and sometimes today. I know what it's like to stand in front of a door and get ready to walk into a social situation or a family situation or a work situation and steel myself up to walk through that door and act like a guy would act if he was at ease, if he were personable, if he were outgoing. To act like a guy who's got it together. And then to leave that same room, that same gathering, and that door closed behind me and be able to finally take a deep breath but be empty inside. Because if any response I got was to the actor. Our 12 and 12 says that the alcoholic has an inability to form a true partnership with another human being. It is my belief on me that is because I never brought authentically who I was to any of those relationships. So while it looked like something was going on, the reason I was lonely was not lack of people in my life. I was a social guy. I was a popular guy. I was 4 years sober, and Connie and I, now she'd been sober 4 years. I've been sober 4 years. This marriage is about to bust up. We had to figure out who the new people in the house were, right? We had to determine. Our relationship started over that 8 ball of cocaine. And it wasn't that we knew we cared about each other. We knew we were invested in each other's lives, but we were different people. We had to figure out if we were compatible. We had to find a different point of connection than we had when we were before. We say it in AA. We knew what brought us together would not keep us together. And isn't that what our book says when it says we're like those people who like from a shipwreck, who have suffered, been in that common peril. But that alone would not keep us together. We found it was read just a few minutes ago. We find that solution upon which we can absolutely agree and join in harmonious and brotherly action. And Connie and I were having to try to figure that out. But I don't know, but at that 4-year mark, we went to get some marriage counseling. I go in, and in my mind, I'm taking Connie to counseling. I'm giving her a ride, and me and the therapist will pretend like, I'm engaged, but it's really about tweaking her up a little. And after 2 sessions together, the therapist said, Steve, I'd like to see you alone if possible. And I was all for that because I know now that we're going to talk about Connie. And I go in there and she said, I'm talking to her just like I'm talking to you guys, right? Just like I do, because I can talk. So I will talk to protect me. I can control the environment I'm in sometimes. Drunk, sometimes sober. All of this stuff hadn't gone 100% away. And I'm talking, and she just stopped me. She says, you know what, Steve? She said, you must really be lonely. And man, it was bone crushing because the moment before she said that, that's not the word I would have used. I didn't think of myself as lonely, but the moment she said it, I knew it was true. The moment she said it, I knew it was true. And she said, I bet you're good company. I bet you're good at a party, and you get 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there and 5 minutes there, and then you go home and you're empty on the inside. And she had described my life 4 years sober. Now, don't get me wrong. That 4 years had been a good 4 years. I was loving AA. In fact, you guys told me how good I was doing. What I didn't realize is how easy you are to impress. Yeah. Did you drink today, kid? No, you're a winner. And there's a lot to that, right? I mean, our book says that the elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. And a much more important demonstration of these principles lies before us in our respective homes, affairs, and occupations. And my first sponsor, Frank, he said, that's true, Steve-O. He said, but that not drinking part is real important. And I would say that not drinking is really important in AA, but it is a launch point for the real gifts that Alcoholics Anonymous has. It's the launch point. It is moving that alcohol off to the side so now I can deal with the real problem, which is me. Now I can deal with the second half of the first step. After we've examined my relationship with alcohol as they did as I walked into that treatment program, and they asked those questions. And pretty soon I began to see myself in the questions I asked. I said, yeah. Now, what the many women of AA told me right away is, Steve, how you answered those questions isn't what make you alcoholic. I've had 6 DUIs. There are people in here who've never had a DUI. I've been married to the same woman for 41 years almost. There are people in here who've been married had been married 4 times, and 3 of them were to the same person over and over. There's a whole host of alcoholism looks different on different people. So those are the types of things that might expose alcoholism, that might be a red flag to it. But you folks helped me see right away that what makes me alcoholic relative to that relationship with alcohol, that first half of the first step, is that when I honestly want to, I can't stop entirely. Which they said means stop and never start again. Not stop for a week, not stop till Saturday, not stop, till 5. But stop and not start again. Or when drinking, you have little control of the amount you take. And it says or, so apparently if either of those things is true about me, I'm alcoholic, but both of those things are clearly true about me, and I could finally see that. And that's when I decided I knew I needed to not drink. And that's about 3 weeks into this treatment program, and we were going out to meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, and people were bringing meetings in. And to be fair, we went to a whole variety of 12-step programs, and a whole variety of 12-step people came in, and that was valuable because it helped me find where I fit, where I got that gift of identification, one alcoholic with another. And I got comfortable, and I was fascinated by you folks right away. I mean, we're not a high-achieving bunch, just before we get to AA as a rule. Usually something has just gone wrong. So at first, I just felt good by comparison to you. Now, I was wrong in my comparative, but I'd set up at a 5 o'clock meeting at the 202 Club in Nashville, and then what happened, I'm a middle-class guy. I was married, as I told you. We had a daughter, Abby. I had a job. We had 2 cars. We had a little townhouse that the mortgage was current on. There were no external problems that other people seemed to be dealing with. And every now and then during that first year, I'd be sitting up in that meeting at 202 at 5 o'clock, and there'd be a guy come in, beat up, and literally beat up and beat down emotionally, and you could just tell it was all gone. And he said, I've been kicked out of the house. I'm living in my car. I don't have a job. I don't have any money. And there'd be part of me be going, you lucky son of a gun. Because I got a wife, I got a kid, I got a job, and I'm overmatched by all of them, and I'm trying hard to hold on and to manage, and I'm scared to death. And so I realized that the most difficult circumstances for any of us to get sober in are the circumstances we are in when we're trying to get sober. A guy like me can find a million reasons why my situation is different and more difficult or more challenging than yours. I'm grateful that pretty quickly those walls begin to fall down. That's part of the anonymity of the 12th step and the 12th tradition, that I give up who I think you are and who I think I am. And for that hour we're together, we talk about the common problem and the common solution. And pretty soon those walls begin to fall away, and that real connection begins to happen for me, one person with another, in a way that it never had before. I got out of that, out of the harbors of Brentwood. I remember going on I left a day early so my brother and I could fly to Dallas and interview for a work thing that we were doing, and they let me leave, and we fly there, and we're flying back, and my brother's on about his third drink up in first class. That's when you could upgrade for about $50, and we're flying back, and he's on about his third drink, and I could see the pity in his eyes, and he said, so let me get this straight. He said, you can never drink again. I only knew what I'd heard, and I said, well, John, a day at a time, I'm going to try not to drink. And he went, have you got to stop chasing women? I said, well, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I said, but being married, I'm going to try to. And I think Connie wants me to quit dating. And but see, he thought now my brother, by the way, called me today, reminded me that in December he'll have 20 years sober, and not in AA. But man, he's doing great. And so I don't wag my finger at that. I couldn't be more grateful for his sobriety, however that's working. But see, that doesn't make me question there was a time, I don't know about you guys, there was a time in my first few years sober, if somebody in AA decided to try to do something other than AA to get and stay sober, I hoped they would get drunk. I didn't say it out loud, but I needed you to get drunk to validate my decision. I was so insecure. Now, I will tell you today, first of all, our book squashes that, right? In working with others, it says if our man wants to try some other spiritual approach, we encourage him to follow his conscience, keeping in mind we alcoholics have much in common. So if somebody does something other than AA to get sober, stay sober, I'm pulling for them because they're betting their life. But I know what works for me. I'm not here to tell anybody what will or won't work for them. I'm here to share what does work for me. And that's what the men and women of Alcoholics Anonymous did for me from day one. Nobody asked me about my drinking. They shared about theirs. They invited me into the conversation. And I was attracted not only to the problem, but I got attracted to the solution. Because the two surrenders that have to happen, at least, there may be more, but at least two surrenders that have to happen for me is, first I got to surrender to the problem, but that is not very comforting if I don't surrender to the solution that Alcoholics Anonymous offers me. And I will tell you that I was a little, and when I finally did raise my hand and be able to say unequivocally that I'm an alcoholic, and everything I thought that entailed, the lack of power that came with that, the alcoholic insanity, that strange mental blank spot, the physical allergy, that selfishness and self-centeredness was the root of my trouble. When all of that was presented, then came the worst news that apparently I had not been paying attention to. If I'm alcoholic, our book says that there may be only, this may be a problem that only a spiritual experience can conquer. I thought, oh, damn. I was hoping for something else. I'm uncomfortable about this spiritual experience thing. I'm not a religious guy. I wasn't an anti-religious guy either. I think I was more apathetic than atheist or agnostic. I'd gone to church as a kid. I didn't have any bad experiences in church. Hell, I'm a Methodist. You can do about anything and be a Methodist. I heard all the Bible stories, right? I heard the Jonah in the well and Daniel in the lion's den and Jack in the beanstalk and right? They were interesting, but they were no different than fairy tales to me. They were interesting to hear, but I had no experience. Nothing happened for me in that environment. Nobody's fault. I just didn't have the experience there. So I was a little uncomfortable in AA. When I first started coming to AA, I wouldn't get in the circle and say the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting. I would step back from that and part of that was legitimate, and part of it was just kind of look at me stuff. I can see the ego part of it as I look back now some. But I had a guy come up to me and say, Steve, what's that all about, man? And he had been worked at the treatment center I'd been at, and I had done my treatment center fifth step with him, which was a confessional of everything I could drum up and willing to share at that point. And it was pretty significant for me to do that. And I said, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't know what I believe, and I'm not just going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya with the rest of the campers because that's what you guys are doing. And he had heard, as I said, that fifth step, he had heard about infidelities in my marriage. He had heard about me being drunk at the hospital when my daughter was born and being sent out. He had heard me having had a head-on collision going the wrong way down the interstate that sent people to the hospital and sent me to jail. He had heard about me stealing time and money from a family business. He said, but hypocrisy, that's where you draw the line, huh? He said, that's really, really noble, man. He said, I got good news for you and bad news for you. And I felt a little condescended to, and if you've ever felt condescended to in AA, it's because someone was just being condescending. But he said, I got good news and bad news for you. And I said, I'll play. What's the bad news? He said, the bad news is hypocrisy is way down your list of problems. And you might ought to address them in the order in which they will kill your ass. And I said, what's the good news? He said, the good news is there's room for another hypocrite in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I will tell you, I'm as grateful for that tonight as I was then, maybe more so, right? Because we talk about perfect ideals. We aim for perfection and settle for patient improvement. We may look hypocritical just like I used to point at the church and call people hypocrites. But this is there's no better place to make a mistake than Alcoholics Anonymous. There's no better place because we don't, at our best, we don't shoot our wounded. We don't leave no man left behind, no woman left behind. When we stumble over ourselves, and that's if that's what I'm going to stumble over, self, because once I'm sober, it is my belief that self is my problem. Self, as described in the third step prayer that we just opened this meeting with, that I'm asking for freedom from the bondage of self. For a long time, I read that prayer, and the mental picture I got was self being held hostage. But actually, self is the hostage taker. Self, as we talk about it in AA, is the egoic mind. It's the pride and ego. And the pride and ego are like the government. They say, we're here to help. But they're not good at it. Right? That pride shows up, right? Isn't it pride that keeps me from telling you that last 20% of stuff? I mean, here, you guys probably tell your sponsors everything. But, a lot of us hold, we will share in meetings to the point that people go, I cannot believe Steve was willing to share that with us. That's unbelievable. What a guy. And then you don't know the secret I tucked away back here. Because it's pride and ego that will make me do that. And it says, you can't let them see that one. You can't talk about that one. You can't put that one out in the sunlight. And I'm held hostage by that. It separates me from you, and it separates me from God when I've got a secret. From 15 to 18 years sober, I had a secret. I didn't tell anybody. And the effect was, and here's what I've come to believe, that it wasn't what I was keeping secret that was the problem. It's that I had a secret that was the problem. And it does cut me off from you and cut me off from God. And I'd be sitting in meetings and I began to feel like, when you look through the wrong end of binoculars and everybody looks a long way off and I'm sitting in my seat, but that's sort of what the rest of the room looked like to me. And then my sponsor had died. I'd had a gap between getting a new sponsor. I got that sponsor, Don M. from Louisville, Kentucky, if you guys ever heard Don give talks, and a wonderful guy. And as I said, he passed away just a few weeks ago. But Don was a noted trial lawyer in Louisville, and we were taking a walk during a break at a conference, and I reached in my pocket, and I gave Don $1, and I said, I'm putting you on retainer. And I asked him to be my sponsor. I said, I'm going for that double secret confidentiality thing here, And I shared with him what I was holding back. And what I know is that pride and ego had held me hostage for 3 years. And what I've discovered, that when I really am transparent with you, there's not a single instance when I have been willing to sit with another man and truly bare my soul, or someone else give me the privilege of doing that with me, that we don't leave there closer and more connected rather than less so. So the very thing that I think is going to block me off from you, that pride, is the very thing that connects me. We are much more, as our book says, brothers in our defects than in our virtues. So if you're holding on to something, it works for me to get it out now. I'm back to telling people more than they want to know about me. I want to tell 2 or 3 stories and then we'll be done. By the way, I'll just give you a heads up. The 2 most often told lies from the podium in Alcoholics Anonymous are, I'll be brief, and I'll end with this. So if you hear either of those, strap in. We got a while, but no. I just kind of, I was talking with Jim a little earlier and his friend Rob, and if you're in that first year or 2 and you see me here 34 years into AA and go, man, that is pitiful. You still got to come hang around here and I'm telling you, man, I'm here tonight not because I have to be, though I have to be. But I'm not here because I have to be. I'm not here because I'm afraid of drinking again, though I can drink again. I'm not here because I'm afraid of my past and running from it. I'm here because I am so drawn to the life I have today and where I'm headed. I'm here out of gratitude, not out of desperation. It's a wonderful shift in life. And what happens for me in Alcoholics Anonymous, now that the drinking is off to the side one day at a time, is that I get to go on this spiritual journey, and I get to do it in fellowship with you. And I get those bonds of self get looser and looser over time. And I move more freely in the world than I have ever done. I am more comfortable with being a pretty average guy than I have ever been. I'm more comfortable showing up as I am rather than pretending to be than I have ever been. And it gives me that connection with people that I never had. So 2 quick stories, and I'll be brief. A couple of the things that I've discovered is that as I go through this process, as I go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't have to, at the second step, grasp and understand that power. I just had to be open-minded to the prospect and willing to go forward. At the third step, I didn't have to believe in God to turn my will and my life over to God, and doing that by following the directions in AA, by rather than being self-directed, being God-directed. The third step is where you turned me away from the problem toward the solution. Before then, I'd been trying my best to do better. First, I'm going to try to not drink. Then I'm going to try to not drink too much. Then I'm going to try to not hurt my wife, not hurt my daughter, be a better friend, be a better son. I'm going to try hard to do better. And that seems noble. It's the only way I knew to come at it. But I get to AA and you guys say, Steve, that sounds good, but you don't have the power. You're incapable of doing that in and of yourself. So rather than try to solve my problem, you told me to establish a relationship with God, to connect with a power greater than myself, which will solve my problem. What I've discovered is God solves my problems, or this higher power, however we connect to that, in ways that I don't imagine. I'm usually wrong about what the problem is, which makes me almost always wrong about what the solution is. And there's a story of the guy who was a top-performing salesman in his company, right? Well-liked by everyone. He had this one thing that was problematic. Every week when he went in to give his sales report to the CEO, he would wet himself. And he was unbelievably humiliated and embarrassed about that. And after about the third time, the CEO was a kind, compassionate man. He said, we're going to hook you up with the company psychiatrist to help you with that. And great. Comes back the next week, walks in, wets himself. And the CEO goes, man, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to see the psychiatrist. And he went, no, I saw her. I got to see her. Well, I'm sorry she couldn't help you with your problem. He went, no, we're good. He said, dude, you just pissed yourself. He said, yeah, but I'm no longer embarrassed about it. Yeah. So what's the solution to my problem, right? See, what I want is peace of mind. And I'm just wrong about what I think will give it to me. I've been spending my whole life trying to be self-satisfied, trying to get something external to solve an internal problem. And it looks like if that happened, so is it the job? Is it the money? Is it the status? Whatever it is it the weather? What do I need? And what I've discovered is I cannot be self-satisfied because myself is insatiable. So what I'm trying to do, you have shifted me to try to connect to this power greater than myself. I was in a meeting at about 30 days sober, 30 days out of the treatment facility. It was packed. Finally, a guy, so that makes me 60 days sober, and finally there's a guy out there at that 5 o'clock meeting at 2:02 that was brand new. And when you're 60 days sober, some of you know nothing you like better than a brand new guy in the room. Maybe they'll start talking at him instead of me, right? I might take a shot at him. And this guy, he was beat down pretty good, and everybody was really being encouraging, right? And they'd give their little AA pitch, and they said, keep coming back, it gets better. The next person talked and said, keep coming back, it gets better. 2, 3, 4, 5 people, each ending with, keep coming back, it gets better. There's no plumber in there named Herb, and Herb woke up just long enough to share, and he said, I'll tell you when it gets better, goddammit. It gets better when it's okay the way that it is. Man, I'm driving home. My head is spinning like Linda Blair in The Exorcist, right? I ain't trying to figure that out, but man, all these years later, I remember that moment, and it is truer today than it was then. I've spent so much time getting ready to have a good day. As soon as that there's something missing. And what I would tell you is that there is nothing missing. We give a lot of talk about a day at a time. At first, when we're new, that day at a time is, can you not drink today? Can you get from today's meeting to tomorrow's meeting and not take a drink? Which is kind of like, can you hang on? Can you tough it out? And that's tough, but it's necessary. But after a while, that switches from from not drinking a day at a time to living a day at a time? Can I be in this day? Can I have the experience this day offers me? Can I not wake up and get out of bed and approach the day like it's a problem to solve, but can I recognize it as a gift to appreciate? And the truth is, I'm hit or miss with that. But I'm no longer confused about the fact that it gets better when it's okay the way that it is. There's nothing missing except what gets between me and God and me and you. There was a man, I told you I struggled with initially with grabbing hold of a conception of God, and at about 8 years sober, I had a crisis in faith. I was reading in the book where it says, and I was with some other men, we were reading out loud, doing it together, and said, you know, God is everything or God is nothing, right? What is our answer to be? And I'm sitting in, I was the one reading out loud, and I thought, well, I need to turn the page quick. The right answer is God's everything. Let's go. But as I was stopped there, I realized I did not believe it, and I was not living that way. And that's okay. You guys tell me that's okay. It's the not believing's not the problem. The pretending to believe was a problem. You encouraged me to act like I believe. Pretending to believe is a different thing. You encouraged me to take the actions a person would take if they believe. But at any rate, so I went on a search for to try to find a conception that I could really grab hold of. And I finally got a handle on it for me, and it continues to evolve a little bit. But in We Agnostics, where again it says no one can fully define or comprehend that power which is God, so I quit trying to define or comprehend. Deep within every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, so I've just adopted the perspective, the point of view, that God is deep within. And that these steps are the process of removing those things that block me off from this relationship, from the sunlight of the Spirit. And then it says that I need to watch out because this new relationship will be obstructed or obscured by pomp, by worship of other things, and by calamity. And pomp is a reemergence of pride and ego. Worship of other things is anything that in the moment I decide is more important than this relationship with God. And typically I don't make the decision that it's more important. I just begin to treat it more importantly. And when I do that, that has now become my higher power, the highest power. It can be a relationship. It can be a financial deal. It can be something that becomes the top priority above that relationship with God. And then it says calamity. And I've decided that a calamity is anything that can't be happening to me. Your calamities have never gotten me drunk. I'm a great empathetic friend when you are in calamity, but I've only checked my phone to see the halftime score of the Vanderbilt-UNLV game, and it could be a calamity if Vanderbilt loses. That rises to calamity in my world, while your financial downfall is a blip on the screen to me. So whatever I've decided can't be happening is a calamity. And this says, as I draw near to him, he will disclose himself to me. And the way I draw near to him is to draw near to you. What you've done by inviting me here is give me that opportunity. There was a man in Nashville named Mo Holleran, and Mo was not my sponsor, but he was one of those guys, and you guys have them. You go, particularly when you're new in that first year or so, when you're going to meetings, you don't know everybody yet. But there was this man or woman there last week, and you're coming back and you kind of hope they're there. There's that person that just makes you feel like everything's going to be okay. And Mo was one of those guys for me in my sobriety early on. And Mo always recited the verse to a poem when he got a chance to share his story. And when he came down with cancer in 2003, my friend Jerry and I went to breakfast with him on an October morning. And he would die in early December, and we knew that was probably our last time together. And I said, Mo, would you mind if when I get a chance to share my story, I end with that poem, because it has so succinctly described my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. And he was a little embarrassed, you know. He said, oh, Steve, if you think it'll help another drunk. And I will tell you, for that 20 years, I've never told any version of this story when it hasn't helped, when I haven't ended with that poem, and when it hasn't helped another drunk. I've been able to share it in front of tens of thousands of people. And it's always helped another drunk, because I'm the drunk it always helps. And he said, I sought my God I could not see. I sought my soul my soul eluded me. But I sought my fellow man and found all three. And when I strip everything else away, that's been my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous. I can't find this God up here. I don't think God does anything to me or for me. What I know is that when I show up, when you guys give me the chance to share myself with you, when you pretend to listen patiently for about an hour, this power shows up in a way that I can't define or comprehend. It made it unnecessary for me to take a drink since June the 29th of 1989. And for the vast majority of that time, it has afforded me a life that's happily and usefully whole. And if it's whole, nothing's missing. Thanks so much for having me.